Thank you. It's a big challenge to be the last speaker because I am sure that you are are tired, but I think the challenge is to bring in a different perspective that is a bit different from what was mentioned earlier, given that the experience, that the context I speak from is different. I know that most of those who are in this room have a number of questions that relate to the situation inside Israel in view of the recent elections and the many questions as to what can result from these elections, and could they lead to a third round of elections, or is there going to be a new perspective or horizon that can evolve? On both cases, the situation is not clearer for me. We are also having the same questions. The image or the scene is not very clear. The possibility of going to third round of elections is possible, but to what extent in each battle of elections can it make things look better or make it clearer for the political life and the political developments inside Israel is something that we can discuss today. The battle of the most recent elections that took place only 2 weeks ago, and even that followed it in the April or preceded it in April, we can describe it as if it was an election between two main camps inside Israel that who, who are disputing the ability to govern over a central issue, which is mainly inside Israel, which is the form of government and the system of government, and all the practices that can be expressed in differently. Either they can describe them as being non-democratic, or to move towards fascism and apartheid, and in all cases they can use these terms because as a result of the practices of the Netanyahu government and the right-wing governments in the recent years. Another main question that the election discussions should have had revolved around and should have been the main question, which is the colonial nature of the state, and that the state is moving quickly. And here I don't agree with what Mr. Jamil Hilal said, that it is not about failure, but rather the second Zionism, or the second republic, if you want, of Israel, and is to have a Zionist project that is bigger than that the Zionist movement in 1948 was able to agree to or accept as a initial foothold, and then after 1967 started to implement gradually and slowly but surely by building settlements in the Palestinian territories that were occupied in 1967, and that was received a major blow through the Oslo negotiations. This wide scope Zionist project that talks about Greater Israel. If there's Sam, you mentioned that we need to discuss sometimes what are the positive aspects of Oslo. If there's anything positive about it, is that in the time when Oslo was signed, this served a blow to the project of the Zionist right-wing movement that talked about the project of Greater Israel, and that is historic Palestine and could even go beyond Palestine in terms of Jordan and parts of Syria, Lebanon, or the Greater Syria region. The second blow came when they talked about a withdrawal or unilateral withdrawal from Gaza, and this was also an additional blow to this project, but this did not stop the advancement in colonial project or the settlement, the construction in terms of the thinking and the political arguments, it was clear that the right-wing parties declined because the two-state solution, a negotiated solution, was the one that was being discussed in the political arena. So they needed to redesign the Israeli Zionist project at that time, but on the ground the project continued to be implemented, because the paradox was that after the signing of Oslo agreements, those who came to power were the right-wing parties that were defeated as a result of the signing of Oslo, that were defeated ideologically at least, or intellectually. And then they started building the new political project, or the old new project, of the Israeli right-wing parties, and over the past 19 years continued to do that until they reached a climax in the past 4 years, where they culminated in after 1995, after Oslo, the settlement activities or settlement they talked about settlements in the heart, that the settlement movement, the settlement construction movement, is not that it's in the heart, only in their hearts, but rather that the settlements need to be in the heart of what would be called later on Israel, and that the settlement and construction movement should be accepted by the wider or majority of the Israelis, as if it enters the hearts of all Israelis. It's true that in the recent elections there are two camps, and today the discussion is which of these two camps we're going to be forming the next government. Is it the 55 seats camp that are under the control of Netanyahu directly, or the 52 seats that can be considered as part of the Kahol Lavan blue-white party, as if it is the alternative to Netanyahu. And in the joint list, the 13 seats that who sit at the sides of this formula in terms of making a preponderant decision. I think the discussion is about internal affairs, about the democracy, the form of governance, as if they are in complete isolation from the continuation of the colonial state control that attempts to have even more annexation of lands. Why aren't they discussing the main issue? Because if we look at review the positions and towards the colonial nature of the state, then there is no separation almost between the two camps. The whole thing will be reconsidered. The image is different because there is almost 107 members, almost plus or minus, inside the Knesset that support the colonial project one way or the other. In what sense? If we look at the Israeli political map, we agree, yes, settlement activities are in the heart, and that all the parties, with the exception of the joint list, all the parties believe in annexation of settlements at varying degrees. Some believe that you need to annex all the Palestinian territories and keeping pockets so that they can get rid of the demographic balance if they do a full annexation of historic Palestine, or through practically parts of what they consider as the Zionist left parties that talk about annexation of the settlement blocks in return for land swap. The process of annexation, or the annexation project, is in the calculations and discussions of the 107 members within the whole political map that is being shaped in Israel, with the exception of the joint list, the 13 seats, that is 13 remaining seats. If we ask about the question of Jerusalem, the same thing applies. The annexation of Jerusalem, everybody on the political spectrum agrees to it, with the exception of Meretz, and Barak talked about a different project in the recent elections, and Meretz didn't even speak to that. In Meretz, they talk about Jerusalem and like internationalization or giving an international status to the religious quarter within the old city of Jerusalem, and talk about two capitals in one city. And therefore they continue, they don't say it very clearly that this is an area that is occupied, whereby Israel needs to withdraw completely, and that Jerusalem would be the capital of the state of Palestine. Netanyahu added something more before the most recent elections and talked about Hebron in a surprising manner. None of the previous prime ministers of Israel talked about that, whereby he went to Hebron, visited Al-Ibrahimi Mosque, and said, "We are here to stay." In other words, he is talking about an annexation of the city of Hebron. Otherwise, how would they remain there? So those who propose themselves as an alternative, like Kahol Lavan, a blue-white party, they talk about annexation of the Jordan Valley in their political project, and the solution that they think of the question in the future. They talk about annexation of the Jordan Valley as security borders for Israel. This combination, this composition that separates without thinking between fascist issues and the encroachment on the democracy inside Israel, and separates them from the process of continued occupation and moving towards maintaining the colonial nature of the state of Israel in the Palestinian territories. They want to separate in this manner between these issues because they find that their main battle is with Netanyahu's government inside Israel, rather than on issues relating to occupation and the sustainability of the occupation, nor do they have drastic or dramatic differences on issues of occupation or colonial nature of the state. So if, practically speaking, this is the situation, then there was a need for the Netanyahu government to accelerate and escalate steps to oppress any tendency to propose the question, the Palestinian question, or the continuation of occupation, or that wants to delegitimize the settlements. There was a need to escalate and accelerate the actions that would undermine the whole system, that could enhance or strengthen the tendencies of the government. So this helped shift the attention to the internal issues inside Israel, such as racism, undermining of the judiciary, or the attack on the media, and shifted the discussion on the internal affairs of Israel in isolation from anything related to occupation. Our central role is to make this link, because this battle that is not that it's illusory, it's a real battle, but this is one of the instruments that the Israeli fascist right-wing parties in order to pass its bigger project. And anybody who listened in to Netanyahu after he was asked by the President of Israel in his state to form the government, he said in his statement very clearly, we are coming towards a time period that is critical in the history of the state of Israel. He says, we, the Israeli government, now has windows of opportunities in order to define its eastern borders. What do we mean by that? What does he mean by that? Sorry, basically is to do the annexation. It can also now accelerate the process of nuclear weapons in the Middle East and the hostility against Iran. He mentioned basically his agenda for the next period of his rule. And so what I mean, that's what I meant by the second phase of Zionism that talks about wider annexation of lands. One of the central steps that I mentioned and talked about in several other occasions that Netanyahu's government did was the nation-state law, What is interesting about the nation-state law that paves the way for the annexation and legitimize an apartheid regime and goes beyond the process of geographic separation between here and there, meaning the separation between here being the Palestinian territories, 1967 occupied territories, and there as if it's Israel, and transforms the process of separation to an apartheid separation between us versus them, because when there's annexation there will be a demographic balance, or not equality but rather demographic balance, and therefore there is a need to put a system of governance that prevents or denies Palestinians the possibility of influencing that regime. If Zionism in its first phase used ethnic cleansing and massacres and confiscation of lands and forced displacement of people in order to build its fair project, it seems that in the next stage the central tool would be an apartheid regime, a form of governance, and if it succeeds, then it would. If others, it doesn't, then they go to the traditional methods that they has been tested in the past. Even in this critical issue that should have been a question of democracy inside Israel, we can see that there was confusion within the camps that considered that their main battle against Netanyahu is one on the form of governance and the instruments of governance inside Israel. So part of them, because the nation-state law carries the Jewish narrative and the Zionist dream, and instruments to fulfill this dream, the most part of these powers was the positions was that to amend some areas of this law, and only some very small parties that raised with us that protested against the law completely. I think these very few are the ones who remained after undermining all the anti-occupation movements and delegitimizing them and making them outside the Zionist consensus, and after all the racist incitement against Palestinian population. These forces are not large in numbers inside Israel, and therefore we see the absence of an active movement, engaged the movement in terms of the struggle against colonialism. Do we raise our hands? Do we surrender? Do we say that we will have to see where the dust of the battle will settle and to see where they are going to agree on? This is not the way for the liberation of the people. The people need to have strategies to face any plan that they are going to face, and all parts of the communities of Palestinian people, and we consider ourselves a living and vibrant component of the Palestinian people. They need to do certain tasks in certain periods of time. One of these tasks is to re-link in the Israeli dialogue or in the Israeli discourse, to try and influence the Israeli public opinion between the colonial project and the undermining of Israeli democracy or the margins of Israeli democracy, and building partnerships, even if with people who believe that their vision now or their phase now is to defend democracy of Israel. Build partnerships even with the unions that are and the workers that are not allowed to organize themselves, the media and the journalists that are coming under attack, in order to bridge this absence and to readjust the discourse and shed more light on the question of colonialism and the continuation of the occupation. International work and efforts, we put that on our agenda, and we will continue with that, because we believe that exposing the Israeli position is an important issue, even if it is under the threat of being accused of being anti-Semite. And I agree not with Noor. Agree with Noor on the main issue, which that there are shifts and transformations in the international public opinion. that are based or are triggered by the rise of to power of right-wing parties and the readiness of peoples in Europe and the US to listen to a different discourse and find their points of agreement, and we need to strengthen that. And thank you.